No student gets anywhere without a teacher, right? Do you agree with that? No one gets anywhere without a teacher. And that's what pedagogy is all about. Pedagogy is the act of you facilitating their learning. You're not doing the job for them, but the student isn't carrying everything on their back. Some teachers, you know many teachers, where the teachers will say, well, it's the job of the student to learn. Which is true, it's part of the job of the student to learn. But schools were not built for teachers. Schools were not built for teachers. Schools were not built for principals or administrators. Schools were built for students. And I want you to think back in your mind right now about a teacher that invested their time and their heart into you. I want you to think about, without that teacher, you probably would not be where you are today. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about pedagogy. We're going to be talking about the instructional strategies that you can use to help students learn, to facilitate their learning and reach a higher level. And of course, I'll send you all these slides. And I'm also going to be talking about some of the cs50 teaching values that you've been exposed to that you might decide to take on into your classroom from this point forward. Does that sound like a good plan for today? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to your piece of paper. Everyone take your piece of paper and hold it up. Let me see your piece of paper. All right, good. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating what's called a KWL chart. Has anyone ever created a KWL chart before? Oh, this is brand new. This is good stuff. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to fold your paper. In the United States, we call this a burrito. What do you call it? A what? Origami. No, like a food. What food is this like when you fold it?
Well,
Lapis? Okay. So you fold it in 3 columns like this, right? All right, 3 columns. This is called a KWL chart. Very good. I get to learn a lot about you as a teacher as you fold this paper. Some of you are like, what paper? Right? This is good. Very good. And if you would, at the top of your KWL chart, at the top, go ahead into the columns at the top. Let's write down these things. On the first column, let's write down the word no. That's the K. No. K-N-O-W. K-N-O-W. No. I want you to write down, what are the... And so this is a place where you're going to write down, in a few minutes, not yet, you're going to write down some of the things that you know already about computer science and teaching computer science. These are your specialties. These are the things that you know really well. The second part of the KWL chart is the W, which is the want to know. The want to know. That is, the things you want to find out today, or maybe the things you want to find out in the future. Because like I said, this is not the end of the journey, this is the beginning. Because in the coming weeks and months, you are a community now. You're a community of teachers. Your contact with each other is going to be beyond today. You're going to speak. You're like a graduating class, right? And you will speak to each other for a very long time. So these are the things you want to know through our time together today. And at the end of today, you might write down what you've learned. What did I learn in the day? So this tool is like a reflection throughout the day. What do I know already? What do I want to know? And what did I learn through the day? If you would, write down one thing in your language. I'm not collecting this, but go ahead and write down one thing you want to know today. What is one thing in the middle column you want to know today? What do you want to know today? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come around with the microphone and I'm going to give you the opportunity to share one thing you want to know. I'm going to hear from 3 people. What do you want to know? Do you want to share? What do you want to know?
I want to know how to be a fun teacher.
Fun teacher, I love that. How many of you want to be a fun teacher and learn how to be a fun teacher? Excellent. Who else would like to share what they want to know? Yes, sir.
I want to know how to make students fun when they're learning computer science.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many of you want to make computer science also fun? Okay, yes? Okay, let's do one more. Who else would like? Okay, yes. Can you speak loud for us, sir?
Okay. How to create instructional design for my class?
Instructional design for your class. How many of you want to know about instructional design for your class? Perfect. You are in the right place. We're definitely going to be doing that together in the next 30 minutes. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go into a short lecture portion today. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a very small period of time where I'm going to be talking to you, very short, and then we're going to be going into another group activity, and then we're going to be finishing off in one final closure together in about 30 minutes. So let's talk about pedagogy for a little while. Keep in mind these slides will be made available to you after our time together. As I mentioned, pedagogy is the process, it's facilitating the process. That is, you are like a coach, you are like a mentor, right? For example, in my home, when my children are learning how to sweep the floor, right? I could be like the teacher who says, go sweep the floor. And then they don't sweep the floor. Why didn't you sweep the floor? And then I get angry. Sweep the floor. But they don't know how to sweep the floor. They've never learned that. My children maybe didn't learn that. But the mentor, the facilitator, what would the mentor facilitator do? They would pick up the broom themselves and say, look at me, baby. This is how you sweep. I make my sweeping dance. Okay? And then they say, oh, the sweeping dance looks so much fun. And then so you give them a broom too, and then you do the sweeping dance together, right? And then you both are having fun together, and they learn something. It's the same thing. They learned the same thing, but this time you are part of it because you are a mentor, a facilitator, right? Not just a lecturer, right? You can watch a lecturer on YouTube, right? Exactly. Facilitates learning. Lectures are important too, though. I want to talk about the levels of learning. If you think about, same example, my children, the first time they saw a broom, they saw mommy and daddy using a broom. It's the first time. What's the question? What do they ask the first time they see a broom? What's a broom? Right? So they want to know. So this is the first level of learning. For your students to program an array, you don't say, go do an array. Instead, what you say is, what is an array? Here's a picture of an array, and that's the second level of learning, right? Is the area of description. We describe to our students what the item is. What is it? What is an array? And we show them a picture. We show them a picture of many yellow blocks of memory and pieces of memory side by side. And you know what? I don't know about you, but the first time I saw that graphic, I'm like, it's boxes. I know about boxes, right? I can do boxes. I can do an array. And then, the next level from that, after your students know what an array is and how to describe an array, then what they can do is they can perhaps explain it back to you. They can give you an example of an array. Here's an array with a 2, a 3, and a 4. Here's an array with an A, a B, and a C, right? They can give you back that example. The next level of learning above that is a very challenging one. This is the compare and contrast level. This is similarities and differences, right? So for example, you learned about an array, and you learned about a linked list, right? Yes. So this is comparing an array to a linked list. And this is where the student for the first time says, oh, for an array, I have to know how big the array is going to be up front, right? Yes. But over here on the linked list, I can make it as big as I want as long as I have the system resources to grow it. So at this compare and contrast level, the student can take their learning a little bit higher. This is a very high level of learning. If you stopped here, it's really good. But you can keep going. Because on top of this, we have the idea of synthesizing. Synthesize is where you can not only compare and contrast, but you can look at many different perspectives. Because in C, we have arrays, and in C, we have linked lists, but in Python, we have what?
Dictionaries.
Dictionaries and lists, right? So we can not just compare and contrast, but we can synthesize all the information together. And then the highest level of learning that we'll talk about today is to create something. By the way, wonderful team, why do you think your last activity in CS50 was to create a final project, because it's the highest level of learning. Because you have gone through all the levels of learning, and now you can synthesize it and create something brand new. So, when you're working with your students in your classroom, you want to make sure you're walking them up this thing. And as many of you know, some of your students are going to be down at the bottom, while some students are up in the middle, and some students are already making products and selling them on Apple.com, right? Some of your students are like, teacher, go faster. And some of your students are like, teacher, where are you? Right? So we help students at different levels, and what we call that is scaffolding. And Margaret's going to be talking about this a lot later today. There are three, scaffolding, you ever see like on the side of the building, when they're building a building, and they have the scaffolds, they have the metal pieces that are holding up the building. They have the places where the workers can stand really up high. You know the scaffolding? That's what scaffolding is. Scaffolding is where you can raise certain students up and allow that student to learn, even though they're not at the same place as other students. Let me give you a great example. There are some students that might have missed the array lesson. They just maybe watched 10 minutes of the array lesson. And then we have another student that's watched 2 hours of arrays. And then you might even have another student that can make arrays all day. They're really good at it. What you could do is if you put them all in the same group together, they can help each other out. The top student can kind of become the teacher and the mentor. The middle student is still rising, and the student who is at the bottom, this student can learn from the other two because the other students are patient like them. There are three ways you can scaffold instruction for your students. The first is with sensory. Sensory. And by the way, when you walked in today, there's a lot of sensory today. I was fist bumping as you walked in. That was showing that I'm welcoming you. That's a sensory scaffold. Also, when you walked in, what was happening up in the air? The music, right? The music, and that is, again, that is a type of scaffolding as well, because I'm using your 5 senses. Some of you burn things in your classroom to make it smell good, right? Some classrooms smell like a locker room at a gym, right? Kind of thing. You go in the classroom like, this smells like a shoe, right? So I did not burn any incense here, but that's another type of sensory thing. Many of you, I'll get to that one in a moment. The next one is graphic. Graphic is the next one. And in CS50, we surely use a lot of graphic scaffolding. We use pictures. Rather than simply talking all the time, we're showing what we're talking about. Because if learning is not tangible, if someone can't see it, touch it, hear it, if they're only getting it through one of their senses, it can be really challenging. So graphic with pictures and things like this is very useful. That's why there's numbers around the room that we'll be going to quite shortly. Similarly, we have interactive. Notice that when I'm talking to you, I'm not hiding behind you. I'm not sitting only here. Instead, you saw me walking up and around. Sometimes you know that students, they're having trouble in your classroom. Maybe they're super energetic, like they're a little wrestler, like a Hulk, right? And some of your boys and girls in your class are like Hulks. You need to walk up to them and be like, calm down. Calm down. And we call that interactive is called presence, right? We're calming down our student. It's okay. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I got in trouble in class. And sometimes I'd be sitting there and I'd be talking to my friends and I'd feel from behind me the eyes of my teacher. And I would say to my friends, she is behind me, isn't she? That's the interactive portion. So when you're in your classroom, you're not just standing behind a desk, standing behind a podium. Instead, you're providing the interaction that your students need. The last thing that I want to talk about is assessment. Because some of you, when we think about assessment, it's very common when I first began teaching, assessment is testing. And testing's at the end, right? Did you learn? Show me the broom. But there are 3 ways you can assess your students. What you can do is you can do what's called a formative assessment. A formative assessment is at the beginning, right? For example, when you were walking around the classroom today and talking to each other, I asked questions like, what is your favorite thing to teach, right? What type of teacher would you like to be? Where did you come from? Did you like it? What we're doing is I'm listening when you're talking, and I'm hearing, are my students, are they ready for today? Or are they sleepy, right? It's how you know you're very energetic. And I'm also listening for how things are going. For example, when we walked in the room today, many of you had a really good idea. You had the Post-it note that I gave you earlier today. Take out your Post-it note and wave it at me. Yeah? Good. Okay? Many of you, when you walked in today, thank you so much. Did anyone not get a Post-it note, by the way? Okay, everyone else? Okay. If you lost it, that's okay, as long as you know your number. When some of you walked in, you had a good idea. You already knew that later, I'm going to be sending you to these numbers.
Yes.
So some of you, I said sit in the first 4 rows, and you're like, no, I'm going up to number 20. Over here. You say, Mr. Guy, I am way ahead of you. Okay? And so by simply looking at how the understanding is at the beginning of the lesson, I'm able to see how things are going. There's also a process assessment that's in the middle of the lesson. It's at the middle of the lesson. The middle of the lesson is the process assessment. And in the middle of the lesson, I might ask, so let's say we were learning an array, and we're halfway through the lesson. What might I ask my students?
What is array?
I might ask, what is an array? It's a good starting point, right? And see, if we're halfway through the lesson, they probably should know what an array is.
Yeah.
What else might I ask them?
Can you give examples?
Can you give me an example of an array? Fantastic. Because if they can give an example, then I already know that they've already defined it and described it, and now they're at their explain level, right? And then you go up to one student, and then before you even ask the question, the student goes, I make arrays every night. And you're like, good for you. Now go teach the class. I'm going to go get paid. And then the last piece, you are a fun crowd. The last piece is the summative assessment. It's the assessment that happens at the end of the lesson, right? It's the lesson that happens at the end. So in CS50, we had a number of summative assessments. First of all, every single week. Oh, by the way, before I get to the summative,
Quizzes.
process assessment. Yes, the quizzes, right? Right? And the quizzes. And in CS50X, there's sometimes labs, right? This is a place to observe the student, things like this, right? But then in the summative assessment, every single week, we had the full problem set, only one the whole week, right? Well, many problem sets, but you get the idea. One of the problem sets, so a big summative assessment every week. And then about 2/3 through the course, we had the test, which is an even bigger assessment, okay? And then finally, the final assessment is the final project. And you know what's so interesting is when you look at how your students are doing along the way, there's very few surprises. Because the whole way, you've been walking with them. They walk into the room and they're learning something brand new for the first time. And then you're walking with them as they're growing in their knowledge. And then finally at the end, you're excited with them because you know they're going to do pretty good. I hope so. And then they do. And then you get to celebrate. And then you get to start it all over again. And that's what pedagogy is you walking through the learning cycle with your students. Pedagogy is not just handing students an assignment and saying, go. Instead, what you're doing is you're walking with them during the entire process because you are not just a teacher, you are a teacher who is a mentor, a teacher who believes in your students, a teacher who's going to mentor and grow your students with them. You're going to be walking with them the whole time. Isn't that beautiful? So, instructional strategies are the ways that you do that. Instructional strategies are the methods by which you facilitate learning. So an example of some of the methods is we might have a partner activity, right? We did, crossing pens or touching fingers, right? We have one-on-one. We have a group activity. I could put you in groups and have you walk around the room like we will in a few moments. Similarly, what I could do is I could give you a test. That's an instructional strategy. There are lots of instructional strategies you can use. In CS50, we use many. In fact, many of the assessment strategies we use, the labs, the quizzes, lecture, problem sets, you having section together and having the opportunity to interact, breakout rooms, the activities in breakout rooms, these are all things that are part of the instructional strategies. In the physical classroom, there's a lot you can do because you're right there and you can change things rather quickly. Because if the lesson is not going as planned, do you keep doing the plan? No, you change the plan, right? You change the plan, and that's what you do in pedagogy, is you change up your instructional strategies based upon what you're seeing. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be beginning in a moment our gallery walk. And our gallery walk is perhaps my favorite instructional strategy to use in a physical room. It's very difficult to pull off in an online environment. If you would, if you are a number one on your post-it note, a number one, where are my number ones? All my number ones, show me. Good. Where are my number ones? Where's my number ones? Okay, help. But do you remember your number? Good, you're number one. Good. Okay, so number one in a moment, not yet. But number one is going to end up right here with your group. You're going to go find your new group. Don't move yet. Don't move your stuff. Don't touch your stuff. Do you have students that watch the clock?
Yes.
They're like looking at the clock. They're zipping up their backpack.
Yes.
They know that lunch is about to happen, so they're zipping up their backpack. And they're so sneaky about it. They're like this. They don't even break eye contact. They're looking right at you the whole time. Okay? So stay still. And then we have group number two is gonna. Where's my group number twos? Let me see. Where's twos? Okay, good. Where's my group number three? Right here. Good. Group number four. Where are my fours? Is gonna be right here. Group number five is over here. Let me see my fives. Very good. See? Notice, by the way, do you notice the scaffolding here? Okay. At the beginning, I said, "Where's my number ones?" And 6 of you went.
Yes.
What is a number one? So by going like this, I'm making sure that you all are tracking with me during the whole time, right? You can do this in your classroom all the time. And then, where's my number sixes? Good. And then my number sevens are going to be right back here. Now, my big request is that look at this row that I'm in right here. Everyone will be going through this row. Please do not go on the top row where the camera is. Because I do two things in my life. If there's ever a glass door, I hit it. Right? Very embarrassing. The other thing that I do is I trip on cords. When there's a cord, I'm on the ground. So please be very careful here. Let's not go up on the top. Let's just go straight through here when you go through. I don't want you to trip. Where is... Oh, here. I'm going to go down here. Yeah, let's... Where are my 11s? 11. Okay, 12. Good. And then 13s. Where are my 13s? Right here. 14s will be right here. 15s are right here. And then 16s. And then 17s will be right here. And then 18s will be right here. 19s will be right here. And 20s. Okay, now, don't move. Some of you are so sneaky. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take only one thing with you. Two things, actually. You're going to take your KWL chart. May I say? Take your KWL chart with you and something to write with. Here's what you're going to do. When you get to your station, there is a question at the station. What I want you to do is I want you to write on my paper, on the big paper. You and your group are going to make notes and answer the question, okay? You're going to stay at that station until I say rotate. When I say rotate, you're going to go up one number, okay? All right, so let's test this out. Go find your number. Go ahead.
Ke bawah atas kan? Bawah ya? Hah? Biarin aja tasnya.
Stay standing up. Let's stand up and work with your group to answer those questions.
Oh yeah.
Okay, silakan. Duranda, Bunana, using concrete things. Okay, sir. Pak ganda ya Pak ya, selain video juga isi. Pak, izin Pak.
Pak Anto.
Pak Anto. Pak Anto, Duranda, Ibu.
Yati.
Mana Pak uang Ibu?
Greeting, play some music, play
How
some
do you use
game.
scaffolding?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you use?
Greeting first. Greeting students.
Bagaimana menggunakannya?
Iya, tadi Pak itu katanya greeting dulu gitu di awal.
Ya,
Terus
medianya
memainkan
apa, Bu?
musik.
But I'd like to take a moment to talk about those things that you encountered in CS50, some of the values that were behind some of the pedagogy. A teaching value is a highly regarded principle, a standard of behavior. For example, a value that I have personally is that every student can learn. A value that I have is that no student learns anything without a teacher. That's a personal value as a teacher. But I'd like you to think about some of the values you saw on display in this class as you went through CS50. You pseudocoded. That was part of the instruction. But there was a principle of value behind the pseudocoding. What do you think the principle, the value was behind pseudocoding? What's the big idea there? What do you think? Why did we do that?
Determine the step.
Right? The idea that step by step and reflecting upon things step by step. So a value that you could take from our session together today is that just as you in this class engage in pseudocoding, and just as your students will also engage in pseudocoding as you're teaching them, I'd like you to think about how you can do the same process with the instruction in your classroom. Just like you're writing an algorithm, you're writing a program, and you're making pseudocode for the program, you can do the same thing for your students with the learning. You think to yourself, what do my students need to know when they walk in the room? How will I know that they know those things when they walk in the room? What will they have to know each step of the learning along the way? And as you're looking at the lectures again, because now you're going to be using, you'll probably be using much of our lecture materials and our problem sets again, you're going to be able to look at sort of the pedagogy behind it, and you'll start asking yourself, I wonder why we taught this first, and this second, and this third. And you're going to start seeing why the path of learning is that it is. And you will be deciding on the path of learning that is best for you and your students. Another value that I hope that you take with you here today, something that we talked a lot, is, it's interesting, cs50 is a program, but there's a value, a principle behind cs50. By the way, we didn't need to do cs50. We could just do submit 50 only. One submission, that's it. But instead you had cs50. What's the value behind cs50? What's the big idea, the principle behind that?
To make sure that our job is correct.
To make sure it's correct and to compare your answer to see if it's, yes. To do the self-assessment, most definitely. Because it's interesting, when you give students the ability to test their own work and it's simple for them to do, they give you what you want.
Yes.
When you give them the way to check their work and you walk them through that process, they are much more likely to give you exactly what you're wanting. Because instead of saying, just go do this, and then I'll test you at the end, you're allowing them to do this self-checking and self-assessment throughout the entire process. So likewise, as you go into your classrooms, you can extend this value to your own, and you can be checking yourself in a way. You can be checking your own instruction. You can be asking questions. How do I know that my students are actually going through this lesson and getting what they're expecting? And how can I place in their hands the ability to make sure that their work is good? But more important, team, it's more important that you as an educator ask yourself, how do I know that the students are following me well? How do I know that the students are learning what I'm expecting them to learn? Because sometimes, and many times, it doesn't work out. There were 3 times during my lesson with you here today that it wasn't going exactly like I planned. So we had to make an adjustment. And that's what we do as teachers. We make adjustments because some days students, they walk in and they're ready. Some days they walk in and they've had a very hard morning and they need your help. They need extra help from you. So this ability to self-assess is a value that we've really talked about. We have this value, it's interesting, debugging, it sounds like just a method, just a part of making a program. And yes, it's part of making a program. People have been debugging as long as the computers have been around. But there's a value behind us teaching you about the different methods of debugging. What's the value behind debugging?
Repair our code.
Check.
Yes, and yes, sir. Yeah, a second chance. And also, I heard the word over here, self-correction, right? The idea of being able to ask yourself questions as you go and make self-corrections. And because there'll be times when, as you were working with your program, you think everything's working perfectly fine, but it doesn't work fine. And it's the same way with your students. Sometimes you'll have to do the debugging with your students and figure out, not just debugging a program, but sometimes the learning algorithm that you've created, the process you've created in the room. I'm going to do this step, I'm going to do this step, I'm going to do this step, and then it doesn't work. And you'll have to figure out, why is there a bug in my teaching, right? And you'll have to make the adjustment. Another value, a fourth value that we talked about in this course, believe it or not, is the idea of rubber duck debugging, right? My friend is right here. Okay. And if you think about it, when I was growing up, the idea of asking myself questions about how things were going, that was not something that was instilled in me and as a value. That came later on in life. And so that's why we teach this in a way, is that as much as this is a programming way of getting at an answer, behind that pedagogy is this idea that I can work with myself, I can talk with myself, and I can learn, walk through a process myself. I can learn if I just have the patience to stick with it. Many of you, and I didn't put this in the slide, but many of you had a night where you were working on a problem set, and it just was not working.
Yeah.
And so you decided to go to bed.
That's right.
But then, I've had this experience, probably all of you have had this experience, where then you wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and you can see linked lists in your brain.
Absolutely.
And you're thinking, I know how to do the pointer now. And so it's another day, and everything's good, because your mind needs time. And just like that, your students' minds need time. You need to give them the time to do that. And you give them the space. Sometimes they don't know how to do that for themselves. I think of my precious daughters. They are so strong. They don't want to cry sometimes. And so they're sitting there. And I'll say, do you need to cry? And then they, And yes, it's sometimes like that with your students. You'll see them stuck, and they're like this. And what you can do is you can say, are you stuck with the pointers? They say, yes. And so you can help them through that moment. A final value worth mentioning is that learning, play is learning, and learning is play. And did you notice how even when you were working with C, it was sometimes fun?
Yes.
I remember the first time I got that first JPEG file out of that raw card file and recover. I'm like, I'm a hacker.
I know Photoshop.
I felt like Neo from the Matrix. I'm at my laptop. I'm gonna conquer the world. What you learned in this class is that you can take this idea of play and you can extend it out. You can allow your students to have fun and learn computer science at the same time. I remember my first exposure to computer science in my undergrad. I didn't last there long. When I arrived to my undergraduate university at UC Riverside in California, I remember I was part of the incoming class, 245 students, computer science. And I remember I went to the dean's office because I wasn't doing so well in the class. And on the wall, was the 1999 graduating class of computer science. Not 250 people, 22 people. So I asked, I said, Mr. Dean, how many students started in 1995? And he was 300. But by 1999, only a few remained, 20-something remained. And in my heart, I knew I was not going to be one of those 22 people. So for me, I had to go a different direction. But then, later on in life, I was able to return back to computer science. And now, I'm doing okay, because my brain has had time. And I've had amazing teachers. And I've had teachers like I'm asking you to be, mentors. And so my hope today, if you get one thing from my time together today with you, is for you to be a mentor to your students above all things. Not just someone that's telling them things, but one that's willing to walk them along to help them learn. Can we do this together?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. So, it is an absolute, it's so cool to be with you here in Indonesia. I'm so happy to be here. It's so great that we need to take another photo. Okay.
Yes.
And this photo is going to be even better than yesterday's photo.
Yes.
And so I have a special assignment for you. I want you to go back into your mind, and I want you to think to last night. And I want you to think, where was I standing last night? Where were you standing? Because your mission is to go to that exact spot. So if you were in the back last night, I'm sorry, don't run up to the front. Instead, I want you to go exactly where you were, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up for the photograph right now. We're going to move on. I think we're doing a break afterwards, correct? Okay, so once we dismiss, we're going to go out for a break, and I really appreciate your time. It's been an absolute honor. Let us go ahead and let's clap for each other as we go find our spots. Go back to where you were yesterday. Thank you.
Yang spot tadi malam kemarin itu.